Hi everybody, welcome to the Course in Miracles Applied. Today's topic is a workshop on defenses. My good friend Leon has a podcast called May the Course Be With You. I'm not sure if it's based on Star Wars. You should ask him. It's a brilliant podcast in which he interviews people that are students of the course, like him, like us. And he posted that he took a little hiatus and he's now back. And I thought, if he takes a little break, a breather, as he said, I'm gonna take a little breather also. So, but today we're back with a topic that weaves like a red thread throughout the course, and that thread is what we call defenses. And this is a workshop because I thought it might make sense to directly apply this while we go through the material to some things in our lives, right? So if you feel like doing this and you can think of situations in your life, money, any problems and issues with money, with relationships, with the world at large, politically, economically, and environmentally, the world at large, work or career, the physical body, emotional body, etc. So if you feel like there's any of those that you want to focus on today, that's what the workshop is for. We can directly apply it to something that we can identify within ourselves as being an issue, right? And we'll apply this little graph to that problem and see how far we can go and see what the course has to say about it. It's raining outside, so there might be a slight noise of the rain hitting the window a little bit. I apologize for that. I hope it's stopping relatively soon. Okay. So there's a couple of things I want to put in this, and hopefully it makes sense towards the end. Defenses are a big item in the course. There are a bunch of lessons in the workbook that are actually the longest lesson in the workbook, with 26 paragraphs, is lesson 135, and that is called If I Defend Myself, I Am Attacked. Right after that, what follows is lesson 136, which is the lesson that we course students use to hit sick people over the head. That is, sickness is a defense against the truth. And we will learn today that sickness is just one example that Jesus uses, which in this case falls in this section over here, the body, right? But anything in this world that has to do with this world, like the work, career, or the body, or money, relationships, or the world at large, is a defense against the truth. So we're gonna dive into that and connect some dots. And at the end, my goal would be for us to have a little bit of a deeper understanding of the role we play in this, and the role our good friend guilt plays in this. Yay, we always come back to guilt. I apologize for that as well. Okay. So we have to first go to a point where we realize what the ego's goal is for us. Right? We've talked about this many times, but it's good to repeat it over and over again until it clicks, and because that then can be applied to anything that we experience throughout our day. Right? The ego's goal for us as the decision maker is to be as far away from the choice for the Holy Spirit as possible. Right? That is the ego's bread and butter. That's the ego's goal. Nothing is more important to the ego, and in fact, there is no other goal the ego has than our seeming inability to choose against the ego and for the Holy Spirit. And the plan the ego has made up for us follows that doctrine to the letter. And it's not that the ego says, okay, I'm gonna sleep now and I'm not gonna pursue my goal for 8 hours, right? Or throughout the day, it might say, oh, I'm gonna give you a break, right? The ego is 24/7 focused on that goal of us moving away from the decision-making power that we have. And one part of what the Course does with us is to, first of all, bring us closer and closer to understanding that we have that power of choice, right? But as importantly, also to make us realize why we're not choosing, right? We're doing this course for 20, 30, 40, 50 years, and we still are having trouble choosing for Jesus and for the Holy Spirit. Oh, we are having a little bit of a brownout here. We'll see how it goes. Right, so it is not easy, it is anything but easy to decide for the Holy Spirit. And hopefully this will become clear once we consider everything. Right, so the ego's goal is for us not to choose, not to even know we have a choice. Never mind choosing. Right, for the ego's purpose is for us to think we don't have a choice. That the world decides for us in one sense. So if you just forget about this outer ring, let's talk about the DM right here. That's the decision maker, our friend, the DM, the dungeon master, right, as we call it. The decision maker is here, and if it would be just for the ego's purposes, none of this would exist. It would just be the decision maker and this first layer. Right? The decision maker with money problems. The decision maker becomes the body that has money issues, and the money issues are on both sides of the coin. Right? If you're super rich or super poor, makes no difference at all to the ego. Right? It does not matter if we're worrying about where our yachts are or how we get food on the table for our kids. Makes absolutely no difference. Right? We think if we're rich, some of our problems will disappear, and that is not the case. Right? The problem is the problem. The problem is always the same. We'll get to that in a little bit. But the ego's goal would be for us to be here in this realm, in this world, fully engaged with issues that we have in relationships, with the world at large. And how that does it is it cuts the cause and effect relationship that exists between us and the mind and flips them upside down. Right? In the ego's doctrine, the number one item is that the decision maker is not a decision maker, it is a victim of any of this, right? Relationships make this decision maker feel a certain way or think a certain way. Money makes this my identity feel or think a certain way. My body, right? Any kind of symptoms have an effect on me, right? If I feel depressed, it is because of my body, because of money, because of relationships, because of the world at large, and because maybe I was just fired, or I wasn't promoted, or my job sucks, right? Everything here influences how we feel. And the first layer of correction that Jesus says is in, as Ken always says, lesson number 5 is the first layer of correction for this, when it says, I'm never upset for the reason I think, right? The ego says, you are upset because of all of this. And Jesus says, no, let's turn that around. And we'll start our path home with a very, very general statement that says, I'm never upset for the reason I think. He doesn't go very deep into why this is so, right? But he tells us very bluntly that you're never upset for the reason you think. You're not upset if your body ages and slowly dies. You're not upset about that. You're not upset about your relationship with your neighbor or with your spouse or with your children. You're not upset about that. You're not upset about the political climate at all, right? You're not upset about the environment. Or if there's a world war and we feel afraid, we're not afraid for the reason we think, right? We're not afraid or upset because of any of those items. That's the first layer of correction, right? Doesn't go that deep, but it's a ground cover. It's a good foundation from which we can then continue on, right? And then he says in the next lesson, I'm not sure which one it is, 35 or something. I could see peace instead of that. So that's the next step, to say, not only am I not upset for those reasons, I could see peace in all of those. That doesn't mean I can. That doesn't mean I'm able to, but I could. Right? I could see peace in my relationships, but I won't. And I feel like this channel is really there for people, for students who have trouble with, or who realize what's going on, but can't seem to make the choice for Jesus. I don't think this channel is for somebody who says, oh yeah, I can decide for Jesus very easily, or for the Holy Spirit. There are others out there. But this, I think, it kind of crystallized out for me that this is for someone who struggles with, it's like Jesus tells me, you know, you can see your brother as sinless. And if we're perfectly honest, we say, I can't do it, right? I can't, I try, and I can't do it. Or I can't accept that I'm not a body, I'm free, right? I feel my body all the time. I cannot really truly believe that I'm not a body, I'm free, when everything tells me that I am. So my work, I think, here in this channel is to shed a light on why it is that we cannot so easily decide and say, I'm not a body, I'm free. There are other factors, there are other forces at play, and I think it's good to look at those forces, those reasons, the purpose we give the body, the purpose we give money, the purpose we give relationships or the world, right? Or the purpose we give our job. Right? Ken always said purpose is everything. And the Course says nothing survives its purpose. Right? Purpose is everything. There's nothing higher in the realm of teachings with the Course than the term purpose. Because purpose decides everything. There's a purpose behind my inability not to decide for Jesus or to hold on to issues with money. Right? Why do we hold on to issues with money or in relationships? Why can't we let it go? Why do we hold on to the news? We're staring at the screen, right? We're looking at CNN or Fox, and we're glued to it. And the outcome of whatever is happening influences us, right? That's the ego's goal, that we are not the decision maker, that the world makes the decision for us, and what we feel, what we're upset about is the world, right? So the purpose of this layer of defense is that we're not going to the next layer. Right? If you ever played video games, you have certain levels, right? Level 1 is the easiest one, you get through it. You go to level 2, it gets a little harder, right? The final boss is in a level that is protected by 24 levels that come before it. You can't just go to the boss and say, oh, I'm just going to play the boss now. The video game won't allow that. You have to go through those layers, get better and better and better and better, and then face the final boss, right? And it's the same with the Course. The process with the Course is for us to go through those layers of defenses and realize and learn what the purpose of those layers is. The purpose of this worldly layer is a very clear, and for the ego and for us right now, a very strong purpose. And we can't deny that. We can't say, Jesus, this is all an illusion. I'm just not going to believe it. The ego says, this is great. Do that. Right? And 10 years later, we realize, wait a minute, nothing has changed. We must acknowledge the purpose that this world, our world and the world at large, serves. If we don't acknowledge the purpose that it serves, we will just look at it and nothing will happen. Even though we can say, okay, I practice forgiveness, right? I practice forgiveness, and so I see my hatred in my brother and I forgive. That's fine, but that only gets us to a certain point. Unless we realize the purpose this projection has for me. Why am I doing it? What is the purpose of this conflict in my relationship? What is the purpose of this symptom in my body? What does it do to me? And what it does to me, that is its purpose that I have given it with the ego. If I feel upset, if I feel depressed, if I feel lonely, if I feel overworked and stressed out, if I feel hopeless about what the world is going through, all the wars and everything, right? The purpose of the world is for us to not realize that we have the choice. And our peace, the peace of God, is independent of any of this. It's completely independent of this. But if we're perfectly honest, unless we're really not affected by the world anymore, and we love everybody all the time with no exclusions, unless that happens, we believe the world does something to us, and we are not the decision maker. And that's what Jesus needs from us, right? He needs from us the honest assessment of where we are on our process, on on our journey. Right? If I get a symptom, if I get pain in my body, do I feel the peace of God? Yes or no? If it's no, that's very valuable information, because then I can say the purpose of this symptom, the purpose of me not having a lot of money, the purpose of the conflict in relationships is that I don't feel peaceful. Right? Whatever I don't have, that's the purpose of the situation. And what I'm lacking is the peace of God. If I have a conflict at work, in my career, if I don't get any further up, or if there is backbiting in the office, what's the purpose? What is it for? What does it do to me? And that's how I can follow it to the core. And then there is this one thing where we go to the next layer. And the next layer, we already kind of talked about it, right? Because the world itself, the body, the money, relationships, the work, career, or the world at large is neutral, right? Lesson 294 says, my body is a wholly neutral thing. That is, again, a correction for our belief that our body is not neutral, right? Our body does something. It has power. It has power to keep me away from the peace of God, right? So the next layer in this defense cycle or mechanism is our identification with this. You know, because Jesus would say, work is a wholly neutral thing. The world is a wholly neutral thing. Relationships are a wholly neutral thing. Money is a wholly neutral thing. The body is a wholly neutral thing. But for us, it does something, right? It serves a purpose, and it can only serve this purpose when we identify with it. Our identification with the body, with money, with relationships, with the world, and with work and career, that is what makes it a defense. Not this on its own. Without our identification with the world would have no influence on us. So if we're influenced by the world, if our state of mind breaks down, if a relationship goes sideways, or if we lose money, or if our body breaks down, or if we get fired, if that happens, if our world falls apart because of this, it is because of our identification with it. We needed this to be a certain way, right? Our identification with this world is the issue. And we have spoken about this many, many times, that Jesus says in chapter 12, section 3, he says, for everyone believes that identification is salvation. Salvation, it is not a little thing. It's not, oh, I'm just identified with, with my story. I can easily change that. If we would easily change it, why wouldn't we change it? Right? We are identified with this identity, with this person, with our story, with our money, with our body, with the world, for a very specific reason. And that reason is because we believe when we identify with the world, it is our salvation. We will literally not die if we identify with the world. So the world relationships, money, the body, work, and the world at large is our safety net. Identifying with the world means I'm safe from God's wrath. Right? So it's not the items themselves. The body is a wholly neutral thing, but our identification with it is the problem, and we can't just give that up because we still believe this identification saves us from certain annihilation, from certain death. Identification is our salvation. That is one of the biggest tools the ego uses. It tells us you must identify with the world, with this body, otherwise God will come after you. The mind is a dangerous place, so you leave the mind and you are in this world fully identified with everything here, and that will save you. And that goes towards the ego's goal. The ego's goal is for us not to be in the mind, because in the mind we can choose against it. So the ego says, God is after you in the mind, leave the mind, go into the world, identify with the world, become your body, become your money issues, become your relationship issues, right? Make your whole life about an abuse situation, or that you're poor, or that you're extremely rich, right? Or that your body is breaking down, that you have some kind of an issue, or that you can't find the work or career that you want, or you're afraid the economy is going to collapse, or the world is going to, nuclear war is going to break out. Right? The ego's goal is for us to stay in this identification, and we are so afraid of God in the mind that we gladly identify with the world. This is not that we're just doing it. We think it's our salvation. We can't underestimate how strong this force is within us. Like, not may the course be with you, but may the force be with you. Like, this force is very, very powerful. We cannot dismiss it. The moment we dismiss it, we're right back. If we don't realize that anytime we're identified with this world, it is because we believe it is our salvation. It's not just something we do, and it's certainly not something we can just not do anymore. It is a huge disservice if we think we can just go to the right mind and poof, the whole ego disappears. We spent 4 million years or billion years developing this over time in a linear time fashion, because we believe identification with the world is our salvation. We can't just say, I'm giving this up. Except the ego would say that. The ego would say, sure, you can give it up easily. We don't even know how big our identification with this world is. We get a glimpse sometimes, and then we're like, whoa, this is big, this is too big, right? I'm going to flee to the other side. I'm going to go to the Holy Spirit. I'm going to pretend I'm not a body, I'm free. Because this is too scary to realize that our identification with the world is there because we are absolutely terrified to go back into our mind. Absolutely terrified of our mind. And it is the goal of the Course to lead us very slowly and gently towards that point where we first realize, all those things seemingly influence me. And then we realize why it is that they influence me. Because I believe my salvation lies in my identification with my body. We believe the symptom that we have carried around for 30 years will save me from the wrath of God, or the money with problem, or that one relationship I cannot forgive. There's a reason we can't forgive, because we believe identification with us as a victim of this other person will literally save us. That's not just something that is said, that is the core of our belief. And Jesus says, you must acknowledge that. You must look at this with me. Don't look away. He always told Helen could not look at Jesus on the cross. And he always told her, look at me on the cross. Look at me. Don't look away. Don't go back to the Holy Spirit. That's not the Holy Spirit. The Holy Spirit waits behind that identification. The Holy Spirit is not when you turn around and look the other way. The Holy Spirit is behind this. Behind all those defenses is where the Holy Spirit waits. The Holy Spirit can't be anywhere else. It's in our mind, but it is protected by many layers of defenses. And if we just turn around and say, I'm not going to look at this, I'm just going to go to the Holy Spirit now, that's not the Holy Spirit. The Holy Spirit isn't there. The Holy Spirit is buried in our mind over layers upon layers upon layers of defenses. And identification with the world is the massive layer. Right? There's a reason for this identification, and that is because we believe it is literally our salvation. Okay. So, but that's not all, right? We have this layer, which is the world. We have the identification with this world, with the money, with our body. That is a very strong defense. What is the reason for this defense? What is the reason for the line that says identification is salvation? Why? Why do we believe that identifying with money, with the body, with work, with all of this is our salvation? Why is it such a strong defense? What is it? I mean, I'm giving it away, right? It's right there. It is guilt. Guilt is the cause for our belief that we need salvation through identification with the world. If we watch a Netflix show and we're totally invested in it, we believe this show will save us from our mind. If we have a problem in the world, if we have a symptom in the world, in our body, relationships and what it is, we believe this symptom, this problem will save me. And the reason why this is so, and the reason why this is so strong, is because of our belief in guilt. The guilt within our mind is the cause for our belief that we need a saving entity, something that saves us. And if we identify with that, we are saved. And Jesus says, and we said that in the last segment, and that's kind of a wake-up call, right? In chapter 27, section 7, it says, of one thing you were sure, of all the many causes you perceived as bringing pain and suffering to you, your guilt was not among them. Right? We believe money is the cause for our suffering and pain, or relationships, or the world career, our body breaking down, is the cause for our pain and suffering. But the cause for our pain and suffering is our identification with this world and with our body. And the cause and the reason why we're so identified with the world and the body is because we believe in our guilt. And he says, you were sure before you got this course, while we read this course, we are sure guilt is not the cause for all of this. We're sure our neighbor is the cause. We're sure of our partner is the cause. Or this symptom is keeping me from the peace of God. This symptom is the cause for my pain and suffering. The reason I have no money is the reason for my pain and suffering. Because I got fired, I won't get promoted, or I have a bad job. That is the cause for our pain and suffering. And Jesus says, you were sure your guilt was not among the many causes you perceived. The cause of everything we see and hear and feel and touch and identify with in this world, good or bad, is our belief in guilt. Again, if we try to just say, okay, fine, turn around and go to the Holy Spirit, that's not the Holy Spirit. The Holy Spirit waits behind our guilt. He can't be in front of the guilt. He can't be here. He can't be here. He can only be behind it. Because we put those layers in place so that we're not in touch with him. We put those layers in place with the ego so that we can't decide for the Holy Spirit. This whole thing is a mechanism which is as its only goal for us not to decide for the Holy Spirit. So how can we possibly just say, I'm going to go to the Holy Spirit, or I'm going to love? Love is not here. It is not here. It is not here. It is outside all those layers, waiting for us. It's the only thing that's real. This is all made up, right? But if we don't look at it and realize it's made up, we will not be able to go through here. So Jesus is here. Love, peace, God, the presence of God, the presence of love, the notion that we're forgiven waits behind the guilt. So looking at this dynamic within us, realizing what's going on, that moment we are stepping out, right? If we realize we're making all this real, we want to make this real, there's no way for us not to make it real while we believe in guilt. And there's no way we're not making it real. If we would not make it real, we would be with Jesus right now. We would not need this course. We would not need to practice. We would not need to practice the workbook. We could simply just slip into the presence behind the veil and be with Jesus. Why aren't we there? We're not there because we don't want to be there. And we don't want to be there because we believe our guilt is so enormous and so unsurmountable that we're not even going there. We're not even going there. We're staying here in those 5 elements here. Right? We're staying here because we believe this is our safety. And we don't believe our guilt is the cause. We don't even think about guilt. We think we can just go from where we are right now to Jesus or the Holy Spirit. And the workbook tells us that we can, right? And that's great. And the workbook is a massive, very important part of our journey, but it is a section of it. It is one rung of the ladder, is the workbook, right? That tells us you have a right mind and you have a choice between the right mind and the wrong mind. Right? But that's not the end. That's one rung of the ladder. The next rung is to realize and to apply all the light that we can find in the workbook. Apply it to this. Apply it to how much we're still identified with our body. There's no moment throughout the day, especially when we get older, if we don't feel it. We either feel our body, we are always in this, right? And those are just 5 general kind of sections. But if you think of it, and if you look at your own life, and I can see that in myself every day, that let's say life gets better in relationships, usually something else gets bigger, right? If a relationship is better, all of a sudden something else happens. Maybe money becomes an issue, or the body, right? Or work all of a sudden becomes an issue. It's like, oh, I'm good with my body right now, and then all of a sudden I get fired. Or all of a sudden something happens in the world, right? Or in my personal world. This ring of defenses must be 100% intact. You can't have 10% where the light comes in. Because then we would realize, wait a minute, there's light in here. I have a choice. I can make a choice. And the ego would not let that happen. So this ring of defenses is always 100%. If one gets a little less, the other one gets more. If that one gets less, this one gets more. If one completely falls away because I have a great job, those 4 close in and make up for that. There will not be a gap in the defenses of the ego. Right? The ego is 100% committed to us not making a decision against it. As long as we're identified with this world, we are in this machinery. Right? And we are upset for the reason we think. We think we're upset about all of this. Right? And then Jesus says, no, you're not upset about that. You're upset because you're identified with this. And you're identified with this because you feel so guilty that you believe you need a defense against love. Right? So all of this whole mechanism that is our lives, that is literally our lives, is a massive defense apparatus against love. But it's not, I don't think it helps that we just say that and say, oh, everything's just a defense against love. Right? That's part of it, but the ego is very, very sneaky. The ego says, yeah, just concentrate on, oh, this is all a defense against love, right? What the ego does not want us to look at is guilt. Right? We thought guilt was not among the causes. The ego says guilt is not within you, guilt is outside. Everybody's guilty, you're innocent. Right? The ego's goal is for us not to get in touch with that guilt, and our own goal is not to get in touch with that guilt, because we believe whoever is in touch with that guilt will die by the hand of God. Because whoever has the guilt destroyed heaven, and that's who he will come after. So for us it is crucial, if we're in the ego thought system, not to get in touch with that guilt. So we look at everything else. We have 1,200 pages of this book, right? And we read everything else, but we don't read this sentence that says, of all the many causes that cause suffering and pain for you, you thought guilt was not among them. Which means guilt is the cause for our suffering and pain. Period. While we suffer, there is no suffering. There's no pain if there's no guilt. which means if we suffer in any of those here, it is because we still believe we're guilty. And that guilt is what Jesus wants us to look at with him. And sometimes we don't see the guilt, we can't feel it, we can't experience it, right? But what we can feel is our identification, right? We're really identified with this body, or I'm really identified with the outcome of the election, or I'm really identified with my money, or with what my partner does, or what my kids do. I'm really identified with that. Please, Jesus, look at this with me. I believe this identification is my salvation. I think I will die if I don't identify with this being poor. I will literally die. And that is forgiveness. There's no more judgment when we realize that we are identified with all of this. We're doing all of this 24/7 because we believe we're guilty. And that's what Jesus needs. That is the only reason for us having a relationship with him, is to look at the guilt together with him. There's no other purpose. Jesus has no purpose at all. He's not there to make us happy. Happiness cannot come from Jesus. It can only come when we decide against the ego, against guilt, and for Jesus, which is us. He's part of us, right? It's the presence of love within our right mind. It's not a separate thing. It's part of our mind, but we have blocked it out. We have turned the other way, and we now believe we're here. And Jesus says, okay, I'm going to lead you back to me. I'm going to lead you back, but there are certain steps. The first step is you look at the world and you realize how big your identification is with your body, with your money, with your relationships. How deeply you're identified with this identity. Right? Don't deny it. Don't say, no, I'm going to go to the Holy Spirit. I'm spiritual now. Don't do that. That's huge BS. As long as you look at yourself in the mirror and you don't see an overwhelming love coming from that, washing over you every day for the rest of your life, you are identified with this world, with this body, with this self, and that is because you believe identification is salvation, because you're so guilty. Right? The guilt is the problem. And Jesus says, we need to get to that guilt and look at it. And we can say, yes, I don't feel it, but that proves the point, right? We have buried it. We have pushed the guilt outside. We are projecting guilt 24/7. We're projecting right now. Otherwise, we would be in complete and utter peace at this very moment. If we wouldn't project, we would be at peace. If we're not at peace, we're projecting. We're projecting the guilt outward right now. We have people right now that we make responsible for how we are, how we were in our past. We make our body responsible for how we feel. We're identified with our body. We're holding on to it. We're holding on to issues with money, with the world. We don't want the world to be peaceful. Right? We can pretend that, but we don't want the world to be peaceful. We want our guilt to be out there. And we're doing it right now because we're so afraid that if we let go of that guilt, God would come down and swoop us up. And the reason for that is that we believe we're guilty, and the reason for the guilt is that we believe we're so sinful, because we believe we destroyed heaven. Right? We were very, very selfish in taking the tiny mad idea seriously that says you can be on your own without God. And that selfishness, the ego says, that is a sin, and we believe it 100%. And that belief is where Jesus leads us to. We have to come in contact with it. We can't give it up if we're not in contact with it. We have to realize I think I killed God. Not necessarily that we killed God, but we think at the very least, there's something wrong with me. I think there's something wrong with me. I'm not the Holy Son of God. Even though I am, I don't believe it. If I would believe it, I would be at full peace. I would have no exclusions. Nobody I would exclude. No situation, no person. I would exclude nothing. I would be in the present moment with Jesus right now, at this very moment. If I'm not there, I'm in here, and the full defense mechanism is at play. It can never be a partial defense. The ego doesn't fool around. The ego wants us away from the mind as far as humanly possible. It does not fool around. It's not an easy thing to overcome. We made a world of billions of years so we don't decide against the ego. We made economies, and we came up with plants and mechanisms and this body. We came up with all of this as a defense against the guilt in our mind. How can we possibly think, oh, I can just give it up? Right? It's a complete disservice to us. We have to acknowledge, whoa, I'm deep into it. I'm deep in it. Please help me, Jesus. And Jesus says, yes, you're deep into it because you think being deep in it is your salvation, because you believe you're so guilty, because you think you're sinful. And that sin is the ego's bread and butter. We talked about that many times, right? When it says there's no stone in all the ego's embattled citadel that is more heavily defended than the idea that sin is real. The reality of sin, which means we have done something really, really wrong, that is the core of the ego's thought system. So the sin and the guilt is the core, and that's what we need to look at with Jesus. Jesus says, bring this all to me. Look at it. Look at all your identification with this world. Look at how you wildly project out. Look at the fact that you are judging from the second you wake up to the second you fall asleep. Judgment is how we make all of this happen. Judgment is that says guilt is outside. I'm going to judge you against this other person or against myself. You're slightly better, slightly worse. I don't want to see you. I can't see you. You're lovely. I'm going to talk to you. You're not as nice. I'm not going to talk to you. Right? We create spiritual communities for the very reason to exclude the rest of the population. There's no difference between a course community and a community of weapon fanatics. Right? Ken said that all the time. There's no difference. He always said, give me the list of those course groups and I'll burn them. Right? That's the core of specialness, and specialness is nothing but the identification with a certain group or a certain person or a certain trait, good or bad. And that identification in this special group is because we believe it is our salvation. If we have a group of people that we love slightly more than the other group, it must be specialness, must be the ego, must be because we believe we're so sinful and guilty that we have to identify with a group, whatever group that is. That it could be the loftiest group, the healers of the world. Makes no difference. Right? Identifying with one group more than with another group because we believe that will save us. It's not because of love. It doesn't mean it's a bad thing, right? It can be very helpful. But it's good to look at it and see what's the purpose of it. What is it for? Does it distinguish, is that group dearer to me than another group? If the answer is yes, we can say, Jesus, look at this with me. I'm identifying with one group more than with another because I believe my salvation lies in that identification. And we can look at this with Jesus, and Jesus says, the reason why you think that way is because you believe you're so guilty. Let me tell you otherwise. Let me tell you that you cannot sin. Right? He says the Son of God can be mistaken, right? We are utterly mistaken because we believe we're sinful, right? We believe it is possible to destroy the oneness of heaven. The Son of God can be mistaken. He can deceive himself. We're deceiving ourselves when we believe there's one person that is better than another or worse than another. We are deceiving ourselves. Or that we believe the body is responsible for how I feel, or the money is responsible for how I feel, or any of this is responsible for how we feel. We are deceiving ourselves, right? He can even turn the power of his mind against himself. We can punish ourselves, right? We can make one of those aspects so big that it overtakes our lives. I was just listening to the audiobook by Matthew Perry, right, from Friends. I mean, I was thinking about this line that we think guilt is not among the causes of our problems of pain and suffering, because his life was massive amount of suffering and addiction, right? And he struggled his whole life, and I think towards the end he kind of got it, and then I think his lessons were over for this time, right? He learned everything he could learn. But if you look at this life that is beautifully written and very tragic but really, really well done, as he presents it in this book, in his autobiography, that if you look at it from the Christian perspective, guilt is the cause for everything that happened to him. But he never thought it was the cause. He always thought the cause is something else, right? And that's us. I see myself so much in that. We hold on to the notion that it is not our guilt that is the problem. And Jesus says, no, look at that. Look at the belief that you are guilty. Your guilt, your belief in guilt, is the cause for everything in the world. Every slight problem, every pain and every suffering, your belief in guilt is the cause. And that's what you need me for. And then Jesus says, if we state this a little differently, Jesus says you can be mistaken. You can deceive yourself. You can even turn the power of your mind against you, but you cannot sin. There's nothing you can do that would really change your reality in any way or make you really guilty. You can't do it. You cannot be sinful and guilty. But you can yourself tell yourself that. That must come from Jesus or the Holy Spirit. That's the purpose in all of this, in those defenses, is he cuts straight through and says, you cannot sin. If we can't sin, we can't be guilty. If we can't be guilty, if we're not guilty, we don't have to believe that identification is salvation. we release the world from all of our guilt. Because the only reason all this has so much power over us is because we have given it our guilt. If we don't project our guilt onto money, there will not be an issue with money. If we don't project our guilt onto the body or our work or the world at large, we will not have problems, because the problems have a purpose, and the purpose is to keep this guilt away from us, right? We want our guilt to be in the world, so we're far away from it. And the ego says, if you get closer to the guilt, you will die. And Jesus says, you have to go through the guilt to come out on the other side and feel the love of God within you now. Right? The peace of God waits behind the veil. If you look in the online version of the course and you put in veil, V-E-I-L, you will get all those beautiful quotes on the veil. There is no veil, the love of God in us together cannot lift. If you look at it in this context, it makes paints a completely different picture, right? There is no veil, the love of God in us together cannot lift. The veil is the veil of guilt that we believe in, and then we draw it over the world, we throw it over the world. So the world now has the guilt. The world has the guilt and we're the innocent victim, right? The world is responsible for how we feel. And he says there is no veil, there is no guilt, the love of God in us together cannot lift. But we have to do it together. We have to bring this guilt to him. We have to look at it together, be willing to look at this guilt together with him. Because it is the cause for everything. We don't have to worry about the world. We don't have to worry about any problem here. We'll do what we do, right? In the world, we don't close our eyes to it. We go through it. We do whatever we do. But we realize the problem is not in the world. It can't be in the world. The world is a wholly neutral thing. It's neutral. We give it our guilt, and then we say, look, the guilt is out there, and I'm suffering because of what all this does. Without our guilt projected on it, the world will become a lovely place. I can't remember the quote. Anyway. I think this is it for today. There was a nice paragraph in lesson 135. If I defend myself, I'm attacked. The last two paragraphs. There's one paragraph I want to read. If you read it with this in mind, if you read this lesson with this in mind, it gets a whole different, it becomes a whole different animal altogether, right? But paragraph 24, it says, all your defenses have been aimed at not receiving what you will receive today. So all your defenses have been aimed at not receiving the love that is there, that is present right now, right? Only because of our defenses do we not feel the love in any situation. ever. And in the light and joy of simple trust, you will but wonder why you ever thought that you must be defended from release. We believe we must be defended from release. We can't be released. Being released for us is the worst thing, because we believe we're so guilty, right? Heaven asks nothing. It is hell that makes extravagant demands for sacrifice. All this is a sacrifice of this. We keep this going in the place of love. So we're sacrificing true love, true peace to keep this going. Because we're so afraid, because we believe we're so guilty, right? It is hell that makes extravagant demands for sacrifice. You give up nothing in these times today, when undefended, you present yourself to your Creator as you really are. So once we go through that guilt, right, that's what we will experience. Then, once we're through this guilt, it is as if we would read the workbook or the course, and we would experience what Jesus says, not just theoretically. We would actually experience it. He would say, you give up nothing in these times today, when undefended, you present yourself to your Creator as you really are. We would experience that. We would experience the love between us and God fully, once we go through those defenses to the other side. He has remembered you. Today we will remember Him, for this is Easter time in your salvation, and you rise again from what was seeming death and hopelessness. Now is the light of hope reborn in you, for now you come without defense, to learn the part for you within the plan of God. What little plans or magical beliefs can still have value when you have received your function from the voice for God Himself. And the function we have right now within this ego world is to look at this guilt with Jesus, go to the other side, and then we will remember our function with God. Right, which is extending the love that is the only reality in this world. All right, thank you so much for watching.